The opinions expressed are those of the host. The material is for informational purposes only. It does not constitute investment advice, and it is not intended as an endorsement for any specific investment. Visit crestmontpw.com for more details.
Welcome to the Ascent, brought to you by Crestmont Private Wealth. My name is Sam McGee, the CEO and owner of Crestmont. We have offices in Houston, Texas, and Boerne, Texas, and we do work with clients that are out of the state of Texas. Today, I've got a special guest, our Executive Vice President and Houston office leader, Alec Walker. Welcome to the show, Alec.
Hey, Sam. Happy to be here.
Alec, we've been working together 11 years.
11 years this month. That's correct.
Yeah, Alec is definitely a big Houstonian. So our listeners out there that are from Houston that relocated or still live in Houston, if you ever want to talk about Houston Rockets or U of H basketball, he is your guy. But today we're going to be talking about something a little bit more financial planning specific that really impacts Houston a lot. We've seen a ton of layoffs that come in mass form. They happen in waves. The last time that we saw really big layoffs was in the energy industry in the 2014-2015 timeframe. And then we saw some during COVID. Just recently, Chevron announced, I believe it was a 20% reduction in workforce. Today, I'm looking at the newspaper, the Wall Street Journal. It is Tuesday, February 18th of the recording. Southwest to slash corporate workforce by 15%. So what we're going to be talking about today is preparing for a layoff and what that really looks like when you're going through it as well from a financial planning perspective. So Alec, you guide our clients on the trailhead and the ascent, those that are working on a lot of career management, a lot of financial planning around benefits management, restricted stock, pension, 401k, making sure they're getting the most out of their benefits. But what is the number one thing you talk about for when somebody's working and they're at risk of a layoff? What is the advice that you give them in preparing for that?
Yeah, I'll first say there's probably two different types of people that are in this situation with employees with the energy layoffs. Is those that are welcoming that layoff, they're close to retirement, and this is a nudge that gets them closer to their destination. And then, of course, those that are still years away from retirement, and this can be a very difficult and challenging situation. I'll start first with maybe those folks that felt like they were near retirement. I'd say the number one decision-making that we're helping them through this instance is managing what does that cash flow start to look like once you turn off the income switch from the company, and then you're turning on the income switch from your portfolio, as well as all your various benefits, whether it be a pension, a non-qualified pension, deferred compensation, all these things that then turn into your replacement of that income, is managing through optimization of those cash flows, asset location, which means which assets and which accounts are you going to be funding your financial goals and needs at which time. That's really the bulk of where our conversations are focused and centered on at that point for those folks that are close to retirement.
Yeah, and it sounds an analogy. I like using weather analogies. The time to go look for food and gasoline before a hurricane is not, 5 hours before it hits shore. It's making sure you've got a backup generator, you've got water, you've got candles, you got flashlights, you got batteries, you got some gasoline. That way you're prepared so you can get through that rocky time. Essentially what you're saying is that having financial planning preparation on various buckets of money to be able to utilize is the advice that you give your clients.
That's correct. And then on the flip side, for those folks that are maybe 10, 15, 20 years from retirement, they're not ready to pull that lever. It's still some of the same principles. And that goes back to when we help create financial plans for our clients is we always start from the baseline is having that emergency bucket, 6 months, maybe to a year, depending on your preference for an event like this. If you're in an industry that the job security can fluctuate from time to time, depending on the market. And then working through all the other options of, okay, maybe there's a severance involved in this layoff. How long is that going to potentially bridge my family or my situation until that next opportunity arises? So some of those same conversations, but a bit more preservation focused and short-term focused.
Yeah, and thinking about maybe a little bit closer to the folks that are able to retire right now that may be getting laid off or could get laid off, and thinking through that severance piece. If you work for a very large company, typically we see this with the energy industry, with the larger companies, that they may get paid up to 52 or 60 weeks of a one-time lump sum ordinary income payment in exchange for a severance agreement. For those people, it might be a good thing if they're really close to retirement and it's, hey, I was going to retire anyway. But walk through for our listeners a little bit about what that looks like. And those 90 days from the time that you know you're going to be laid off till the time you're actually living off the portfolio, it's pretty intense, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I would say the number one thing we're doing during that time is gathering updated financial information, updated pension values, updated 401k account balances, deferred comp. What is that severance amount? Getting those updated assets so we can make sure that we're building out what's the playing field that we're on here. And then the secondary piece, really, which is the more forgotten piece, but really probably the most important, is diving into what do those expense projections look like. And those could be the kind of high-level, month-to-month basic living expenses, as well as, hey, what are some major goals that you want to do, whether it's travel or home renovation costs or paying for costs for your children or support for your parents, all these big things that you may not think about but really need to be aware of so that we can dive in, tighten and loosen the screws as needed on the plan to increase that probability of success. So during that 90-day period, we're gathering data, having discussions, we're running analysis, meeting with the clients to discuss, hey, here's what we're seeing, and having that back and forth two-way communication and adjusting as needed.
And Alec, do you find that most people, when Crestmont starts working with clients, do most people have a handle on their expenses, or do you find that this is new to them? Is it a mixed bag? Talk a little bit about that in general.
It's one extreme or the other. I'd say for most people, they really don't have a good handle on it, which for most folks that have a good income, good salary, they're not really thinking about their month-to-month expenses while they're working. And so we do work with them, develop a spreadsheet of, hey, where is your spending coming from? For clients that are looking to maybe buy a second home, we've got hey, here's what that cost of your home will look like over the next 20 to 30 years, down to renovation costs and things like that. So most people don't have a good track record. Those that do, which is, I'd say, probably about 10%, they've got a great handle on it. And so that makes the analysis piece a little bit quicker.
Yeah, a little bit easier. But either way, Crestmont takes every client through that expense realization, if you will. And
that's correct.
And as you think about severance and layoffs, and we mentioned a couple companies that have announced recently, Southwest Airlines and then Chevron, that's a lot of families. And as you think about those that might be impacted, and not singling out these companies, this happens across the board in corporate America. But what are some of the specific pieces that individual worker will have to deal with, whether they have severance or not? Take us through maybe the 401k and the pension, and if they have restricted stock and the healthcare. Just touch on a few of these important pieces where maybe they need guidance.
Yeah, there's probably going to be a decision if their company offers healthcare benefits for retirees, switching over to that plan if it's not an automatic process, or if their company does not, which is still very common, does not offer medical benefits for retirees, getting onto an individual plan for their family, which can have some additional costs to that as well. As it relates to pension, 401k, other qualified retirement assets, if it's a pension, there's going to be an election form. They're going to need to request that election form from their pension record keeper, fill that out appropriately, make their decision on whether they're taking a lump sum, taking an annuity. Sometimes they offer a 50% annuity, 50% lump sum option, so determining what the decision is there.
Yeah, so a lot is going on. On one hand, if you're impacted by a layoff and you either get severance or you don't, either way, there's a lot of decisions to be made, a lot of things going on, as well as, oh my gosh, either the jubilation of, yes, I get to retire, or, oh my gosh, where is my next paycheck coming from? So it's a lot to take on. In your experience with working with folks that have been severed and it wasn't expected, what have you seen that has been helpful for people to weather that storm in their life financially, but also to stay grounded through that process?
Yeah, I think For those that it's a little bit more unexpected, they weren't ready for it, wasn't part of their plan. I think going back to updating their financial plan, running some long-term forecast and analysis, which may be better than they expected, still showing the lack of that, can help ground them a little bit and release some of that stress and pressure. Because it's just like anything, if you're not checking in on it, you don't know what their latest readings or results are, you're living in this area of uncertainty. And so providing some sort of clarity amidst a very uncertain time provides some reassurance. And then I think back to even a great benefit that Crestmont provides is we're also providing to our clients, whether it's during a layoff situation or not, we're providing our advice and experience that we've seen through hundreds of other families over 10 to 15 year time horizon of other families that have gone through similar instances, that we can share that experience, share best practices for them to get through the storm, which they have maybe never gone through before.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like your home chef show that you did last year on the chef that's done 100 of these steaks and has the experience to know the exact right temperature and what cuts of meat to get. And having that kitchen experience ends up with a better product. And I think you're right. Having a group that has been through a variety of layoff cycles, different industries, which Crestmont has, it can be very valuable to clients and peace of mind. And thinking back to what you said to me last year, and I don't think it was even in this context, but the height of uncertainty is also the height of anxiety. Taking a client that may be facing a layoff or severance situation, whether they're somewhat happy about it because they can retire or gosh, they're worried about the next paycheck, having those additional assets that they can pull from, reminding them of that and showing them that forecast, like you said, that doesn't maybe change their probability of success. It's just a temporary, maybe it gives them peace of mind.
And even if you do provide some certainty and maybe the results aren't as good as you hoped, at least you've removed the question mark and say, okay, here's where we are. If we want to get to where we were planning on going or whatever that new objective is, we need to do X, Y, and Z. We need to take these steps to get there. And there's still going to be anxiety around that, but at least there's some clarity and framework moving forward.
Yeah, it reduces the uncertainty, which should reduce the anxiety. Yeah, I completely agree. Alec, that's all we have time for today. Today we've been talking about severance, layoffs, financial planning around those, what that can look like. And maybe you're facing a layoff, or maybe you're worried about, gosh, could this happen to me? How can I be better prepared in the event of? So how would they reach you, Alec, if they wanted to explore their financial security in preparing for one of these events, or maybe they're going through one?
The best way to reach out to me directly, Alec, ALEC, at crestmontpw.com, or my phone number, 832-288-5402. Really just to set up an initial discussion, conversation, what's going on, and then, as I mentioned, to provide some sort of analysis and where you are today would be to gather some financial information and allow our team to digest that and present it to you with some potential recommendations.
Excellent. Alec, thank you for joining us by phone, and look forward to seeing you here in Boerne soon enough. And I hope everyone that's been listening has gained something from this. This is the Ascent, brought to you by Crestmont Private Wealth. Have a great weekend, and God bless.